Please rewind this cassette.
Barry season 1 was one of the more pleasant surprises of 2018. And I remember when I did my review for the first season that there wasn't a lot of people talking about this show. I'm not trying to be a hipster and said I was in on it early, but there wasn't a lot of YouTube reviews of the show. I remember finding only like 2 or 3 other YouTubers did a review of it. The show didn't become like a ratings hit. It just did okay. And then it got a lot of attention later on at the Emmys and the Golden Globes, and then eventually it did seem like Barry did build a cult following. Although I would say that the show is still underrated. I've noticed that more people watch it now, and it certainly has more of a following than it did last year, but overall, I think my idea that Barry was going to blow up a few years in, maybe I was wrong about that. Maybe if it was on Netflix or something like that, but perhaps being the follow-up to Game of Thrones isn't enough anymore. So we're going to talk about season 2 and mainly in comparison to season 1, and then we're going to talk about specific episodes, the tone and the structure, and how I overall felt about this season, because I gave the first season an 8. I praised it. I thought the finale was terrific. In fact, I thought the last scene of the finale was so good that it could have been a series finale, not just a finale for the first season. That's how good the first season of Barry was. And the second half really was better. The first half of Barry was good, but it wasn't until the second half things really came together, in particular with like episode 7. So let's just break down the episodes here. So the first episode of season 2 is phenomenal. The Show Must Go On, Probably, directed by Hiro Murai, who I'm a big fan of. He does a lot of music video work. He works with Childish Gambino. He directs Atlanta. He directed a lot of episodes in the first season. Well, I think a couple episodes. This is a phenomenal premiere. There's a terrific sequence in this where the actors in the acting class that Barry takes all start acting out a story that someone's telling. Now, it's Barry telling the story. I think it's Barry. And then they start acting the story out. It's the first time he killed someone. And then they kind of get this conceptual idea, Henry Winkler's character, that we're going to do a play where everybody tells their stories and then everyone else kind of acts out the stories that are being told. You have to write your own story, and then together we'll all act them out. And this is a great little parallel thing because this establishes a new visual narrative idea. As in the first season, Barry played with fantasy sequences, where Barry would have this alternative fantasy life that was his future, where he had a kid and he was happy and successful. And then they kind of played with that in the series finale. Well, in season 2, the show's built around flashbacks. They don't do the fantasy scenes anymore. So we get a bunch of flashbacks to Barry's campaign in the military, what happened to where he could no longer be a Marine, and basically kind of where his mental state is. Although we really don't get that much information. Him and Fuchs' relationship is still really kind of left as a mystery, even though it builds up more tension as time goes on. Anthony Carrigan comes back as Hank, who is one of the best parts of the show. That accent he's come up with, his delivery, his emotional performance, the idea of the character being really polite but doing these gangster things, especially his relationship now with the gangster from the previous season who was once his enemy. I mean, there's a montage where they're like playing volleyball that's fucking hilarious. So I really like this episode. I think this was one of the best episodes of Barry and really got season 2 off to a really great start, especially just establishing these new narrative ideas without really involving much of the hitman stuff that was in the first season or a lot of the mob stuff, even though, once again, Barry's kind of getting pulled in. You know, he's being pulled back in by Hank, and then Fuchs is always kind of this overarching devil-like figure, really. As the season goes on, you start to see him that way. Then we go to episode 2, The Power of No, which is another really, really good episode. Barry has to go kill an enemy of Hank's, but Barry has vowed to not kill anyone after the end of season 1, where he did a horrible thing. So in season 2, Barry's really trying to stick to that. He's trying to focus on his acting. He's become a better actor, and he doesn't want to hurt anyone anymore. But he's kind of put in a bad situation with Hank. Now, once Barry can't follow through with this, he goes to Hank and says, well, why don't I just train your men to be better killers and then they can do the work for you and then I don't have to end up killing anyone. Now, this is Barry trying to have his cake and eat it too. Sure, he's not killing anyone, but he's still contributing to the future death of others by training these men. And that leads us into episode 3, Past, Present, Future Over Yesterday, which this is a really, really nice episode. It shows that Barry's trying to be more of a serious show and less of a comedy, although I think it kind of helped Hader's performance in the first season, that balance of comedy and drama. Where in this season, for at least the first few episodes, he's trying much more to be a serious actor, and the tone's a lot more serious. He finds a special prodigy, a guy who's a really good shot in Hank's Men, and this kind of establishes a thing where you're like, well, where's this going to go? Is this going to end in some tragedy or... And I guess I won't spoil it. I guess to really get into it, I have to spoil it, but there is a payoff to it at the end of the season. But I would say episode 3 is one of the weaker episodes, while still solid, because Barry being only a half-hour show doesn't really ever suffer from pacing it. Then the season starts to get really good. We get the episode What? The detective from the first season, who was a partner of the woman that Barry killed, is now hunting Barry down. So this whole episode's all about him and Fuchs working together to try to get Barry to confess to this murder. And this episode is just top tier work from Hader and the writers and Berg and them and everybody who works on the show. Because what makes this episode so good is that it's intense. It's very serious. It's very focused. It feels like these plot lines are going in a certain way. It feels like Barry's really in a corner. Once again, they're doing that Breaking Bad thing, which they did with the first season. You really feel like, how's he going to get out of this situation? And then this whole episode ends with the fucking punchline. And it's the title of the episode, What? And I really didn't laugh much this episode, or much this season so far. These first few episodes, I didn't laugh. I laughed for at least 2 minutes at the end of this episode. Like, the last scene of this episode and Bill Hader's delivery on that line had me laughing so hard. So I was so excited for the follow-up to this because they established, like, a lot of tension where it's like, well, shit, Barry could go down. This could get even worse because Henry Winkler's character, who's become, Bill Hader's like father figure, he's become his new mentor instead of Fuchs. That, if he finds out what happened, this could really ruin what he has there. And while this is all going on, we're also getting this storyline with Sally's character, who I had issues with in the first season, who I like a lot more this season. By the way, the actress who plays Sally is amazing. It's kind of one of the meta things about the show. She's the best actor in the class, and she's one of the best actors on the show. And we're seeing her career kind of rise to the top. She's getting a lot of work in like television and cameos and stuff like that, small roles, and she's getting offered bigger deals, and everyone in the acting class is getting jealous of her. I much prefer Sally's plot line this season to the first season. So then we get the episode that many critics are calling the best episode of this show. Many fans consider it to be one of the best pieces of television so far this year, and it gained comparisons to the Coen brothers and David Lynch, particular his work on Twin Peaks: The Return. Now, I'm not a hater of Ronnie and Lily. I'm not going to act like Ronnie and Lily wasn't an achievement, because it was. And I know Nerdwriter did a whole fucking video on it, because eventually everyone has to jump on the bandwagon, and then Nerdwriter has to be like, I'm going to make a video now, like, I'm going to make the definitive Barry video. And even though, some of us were talking about it before, although I'm not hating on Nerdwriter, it's just, he kind of has this way how he does things that irks me. But well edited. But anyway, Ronnie and Lily is basically an extended action sequence. The episode starts with Barry having to go kill this guy because of things that happened after the events of the previous episode. And he tells the guy at the beginning, like, listen, someone sent me here to kill you. I don't want to kill you. So I'm going to have you pack your bags, and we're going to get you on, I think, to Chicago. We're going to get you to Chicago and then just hide out there for like a year. And there's this great visual joke as things go on. The Hader directs this episode, and he steps his game up. He does this amazing camera work where things get revealed slowly. The camera pans for a long time. Sometimes the camera will just stay on one shot, and things will be happening out of the frame, and then things will come back into the frame, which just a wise choice. I mean, it really shows a great level of restraint and maturity on Hader's part as a filmmaker. That's one thing I really have to point out. If Hader's acting, I don't think was elevated this season, which isn't a criticism. I just think he did great in season one. I think as a director, he's going to another level, and I'm very excited to see his work in the future, including movies. He shows that he has an knack for cinema. This is probably visually, from a cinematography standpoint, the best episode of Barry. But there's this great joke early on where he starts to find out that this guy is like a taekwondo master and he has all these trophies and medals and all that. And then Barry kind of realized, like, oh, I'm fucked. This guy could kick my ass. And that is a funny joke, man. It really is. Like the way it gets revealed and Barry slowly realizing the situation. And this guy who looks just like John Hamm. It's like, when did John Hamm learn martial arts? So then you get these kind of John Wick, The Raid-esque fight scenes that are very realistic as Barry and this guy go at it. And they stop to catch their breath. They get hurt. They can't just keep taking a beating. And for a while, I think this episode is great. I think that first, 15 minutes is great. But then Lily comes into the story, which I think this is what's going to divide a lot of people. A lot of people think that the absurdity that Hader embraced with this episode, because so far Barry's actually been a pretty grounded, realistic show, despite doing things for the sake of storytelling and entertainment. But for the most part, Barry is grounded in its own reality, and that's a quality I like about the show. This is Hader going full slapstick, full absurdism. I mean, and some critics said it opened the show up to new avenues. And maybe that's true. Maybe the show embracing some supernatural elements and absurdity isn't a totally bad thing. I'm not against it either on paper, but it just got a little too over the top for me. I don't love this episode as much as everyone else seems to. I don't like Lily. I think the things with Lily, like running across the tree like an animal and biting Fuchs' face, and how she has these, and Barry even says, it's like she's not even human. I kept thinking, is this reality? And I know some people love that about it. I didn't. I thought the tone kind of just went against the previous episodes of the entire show, and I thought it was too much of a leap. I think if they had just pulled it back a little bit more, it could have been better, because it felt like this was the episode with the least amount of plot. This felt like the story really did move forward. And just how it conveniently resolves everything at the end to take Barry out of a really bad situation, I thought was cheap, honestly. And that this was kind of set up as a vehicle for Hader to just show off his technical abilities as a filmmaker, which I understand. Now, having said that, I still think Ronnie and Lily is a fine piece of television. Like I said, the fight choreography is great. The camera work's great. The performances are phenomenal. Hader is great in this episode. And the flashbacks in this episode are some of the best. There's really a shot that's just so amazing during the flashback scene. So I have no issue with a lot of that stuff in this episode. The way it ends up in a grocery store did have a Raising Arizona feel to it. So yeah, praise to Hader's directing, but I think from a writing standpoint, there was too many leaps in logic for me. And the fact that none of this stuff came up again, it didn't keep following up. Like the way this episode is, and then the next episode, everything just goes back to how it was before, really threw me off. But people love this episode. I'm not trying to knock it. I'm not trying to say it was bad, but for me personally, Ronnie and Lily is not the highlight of the show. I don't think it's the best episode of the show. And I don't think it's this masterpiece of modern television that people have said it is. I think it just has some really good fight scenes and some really funny moments. Like Barry talking to Ronnie is funny. But I don't know. We'll have to see how this plays out in the future. If there'll be more of these standalone episodes like this, and maybe they'll be self-contained in a way like the X-Files would do something like that. Now, Barry jumps right back into gear, though, with the next episode, The Truth Has a Ring to It, which is all about the truths that we all have, is that Sally's having a hard time telling the actual story of what happened with her ex, which is what she's chosen to perform in this play. And Barry's trying to tell her that, well, hey, you don't have to tell the truth. But this is him struggling with telling his own truth because he can't tell the actual story of what it was like when he first killed a man. There's a great fantasy sequence, which is actually one of the only ones. I didn't think about that. There is one where he said, the first day I killed a guy was the best day of my life, that it was the first time he ever had a purpose. And I love that. But Barry acts like he was like traumatized and sad, and he keeps lying about it. All except to his mentor. Um, that stuff is just great. The parallels between truth and what we keep to ourselves and what we want to tell others, and then Sally and Barry knowing if they could have truth with each other, and this also goes in the relationship that Barry has with Fuchs. It goes in the relationship that he has with the class, how he feels about himself. Is he honest with who he is? Um, Even with Hank, all of this stuff ties together. The thing that I was having issue with this season as opposed to the first season is that I felt like all the plot threads in season 1 were a lot tighter. I felt like how everything connected. Barry's friends from the Marines, how he got involved with the mob and how they turned against him and how he kept getting pulled back in, how he got involved with the acting class and started to change his ways. I felt like all of that was so organically handled and just woven beautifully. Where this season I felt like everything was scattered a little bit more. So when I got to this episode, I was enjoying it, but I was getting worried. Like, these episodes feel more like standalone, and the season doesn't feel like it has as much of an arc as good as the previous season did. It just doesn't feel as written as tight, and it feels like they're getting a bit looser with things, and they're going more for entertainment and these broad strokes instead of having a really specific show, which is what it was. But having said that, what's great is that the last two episodes, all of the subplots that I felt like were scattered start to come together. And then all of the storylines and themes and this play that they're going to perform, and Sally's career, if it's going to go up or it's going to be destroyed. Barry getting this audition for a Jay Roach comedy, which ends up being one of the funniest bits in the episode. There's this great scene where Sally gets this like extended monologue ranting to Barry, and it's just on her face, and it's like 2 minutes, and she's brilliant. And then you just cut back to Barry, Bill Hader, and he just has this look on his face like, and then he keeps reading the lines from the script. And in the script, he tries to get a guy to eat a shit pie, and then he ends up eating the shit pie, which is great. I absolutely loved it. And the cameo from Jay Roach, I thought borderline was going to be like an entourage thing, but they did it very cleverly. And I'm glad that the show's actually showing that it might be able to evolve, because shows that I ended up loving, like Mad Men or early Game of Thrones or other shows, is that they would eventually change over time. They'd reinvent themselves. I think if the show stayed in the acting class and with the same thing happening too much, the show would get stale. I think eventually Barry does have to work on a movie set. I think the show has to change locations. I think it does have to reset things and be different. I think they got away with it for 2 seasons, but I don't know if I could watch 4 or 5 seasons of Barry doing this, because it would be at the risk of repeating itself, which I don't want it to do, because I think it's a really fresh show. But that episode's great, as is the last 2 episodes. The audition is a phenomenal episode where everything goes shitty for Hank. Everything, the Fuchs Barry thing really blows up. How they bring in these storylines is just so incredible. And what really happens, what's great about it, is like Fuchs is now brought in with the Hank storyline and the men that Barry trained and the mobster stuff and the subterfuge and the betrayal. And also the class is more involved with the plot lines. Now Sally's more involved. Everything starts to kind of come together. It didn't. The first season, I think, did a good job of every episode felt like everything was stick together. This episode's a slow burn to a payoff of things, but the audition's a wonderful episode, and you feel like there's going to be this almost new villain rival to Barry coming up in the ranks in a sequence where you think a bunch of characters are about to die, and then they use some of Barry's training to get the upper hand, and you're like, okay, where's this going to go? And it actually really doesn't go anywhere, which is one unfortunate thing. But things that were established early on, like Hank giving Barry a bullet and telling him he needs to use it to kill someone, that comes back into the finale. All of these things end up coming back around. So for me, the audition's probably my favorite episode of the season, just for its moments of spectacle, how it brings all these elements together, and just the comedy there. The comedy was being very well balanced. So then we get to the final episode, Berkman Block, which is a great episode too. This is a really good finale. I don't know if it's quite as good as the finale of the first season, but it's on par with it, especially where it ends. It ends in a very similar moment where it's like, shit, how's Barry gonna get out of this one? Um, the last shot of the audition is so haunting and horrifying and so fucked up, and you're expecting the opening of Berkman Block to really hit you. And Hader directed this episode, the finale, which is I think even more impressive than what he did in Ronnie and Lily, especially this thing he does with somebody whispering something in someone else's ear and how he plays it off in the final moment. Just incredible. I really love this episode. You know, you get the play, you get Sally's payoff that she ends up not telling the truth, and that makes her career better, and she ends up getting success from this, and that isn't what she wanted. Even though, you know, if you're an actor, you're going to make a living off lying and pretending to be other people, so why give a shit? I mean, I don't know why she has this, like, artistic integrity when part of being an actor is sort of like, you know, you go with the script, you go with the pretend. I like this episode a lot. I really like this clever thing where Barry puts something in a trunk of a car and how that pays off. I think all that stuff's so well written. I think this is the best written episode of the season. My only issue with this episode is there's a shootout at the end, and I won't spoil everything, but in this shootout, which has a Coen Brothers-esque moment where somebody kicks a door and then gets their foot stuck in the door, directed by Hader, and it's like, shit, dude, you're a really good director now. That is very Coen Brothers. That felt a little over the top to me and absurd again. I don't mind that this character is able to kill so many people, but the fact that they're able to just go in and take out so many people that have assault rifles and are positioned to kill this person, and they're just knocking them down one after another, it felt a little too fantastical. Most of Barry's violence and all that has been grounded for the most part, but this was in the Ronnie and Lily way. This was very over the top. It didn't feel realistic how this character was able to kill so many people. I get what it meant thematically for the season. I get what it meant for specific characters and how it wrapped a lot of things up. But I think they could have handled it in a more practical way, that how the character does this is by using his brain. Like he like maybe snipes a few guys, then he goes in there, takes out a few guys like in a stealthy way, then he gets an assault rifle himself and then has an upper hand. But he just goes in there with like a fucking handgun and kills like 30 people. I just couldn't believe it, especially since we've seen a similar scene in season 1 that didn't work out that way. So having said all that, do I like the season as much as the first season? Overall, yes. I think this is about as good as the first season. This is a problem with a lot of cable shows, though. This is a problem with a lot of these shows, is that the first season kind of plays like a long movie, and then it's hard to really follow it up when it has to turn into more of a TV show, which naturally it's going to. But I give the first season an 8, and I'd give this season an 8. I wouldn't give it anything less than that. I think it's another solid season. I know some people think this season is much better than the first season and elevates the show. I'd say standalone moments and episodes and performances do elevate the show, but I think as an overall season, it has things that just don't mesh as well as I think the overall first season did. I think the first season, everything connected better, but I think this season has bigger highs than season 1. So for that, I would say this is a great follow-up season, and they have potential to have a really great season 3. If it just wasn't, I don't know, I enjoyed every episode. I laughed a lot. I was always invested. I really care about Barry. And I remember Norm Macdonald said something in an interview with Bill Hader, that the real Bill Hader is unknowable, and Hader said that's true. And I think that really is kind of part of the meta aspect, once again, of Barry, that Hader is unknowable, thus Barry is unknowable. So Barry is Hader in that sense, and it's Hader trying to almost figure himself out through the show in the process of making it, through this character, and hopefully maybe we can understand him a little bit more, not just as an artist, but as a person. I don't know. I didn't. It's weird to criticize it because really I loved it. I loved season 2. I hate being negative. Like, I don't want to sound negative, but I did think the absurdity was too much. I do think they leaned on the fantastical too much in certain moments. And I just think overall that there was too many subplots and it took a little bit too long for things to kind of come together. Still, though, very tight. This was so much better than Game of Thrones season 8. This was so much more enjoyable every Sunday than watching an episode of Game of Thrones, which blows my fucking mind. And it's one of HBO's best shows. It might be HBO's best show right now. And I really hope Barry gets more popular. It really feels like it should be a phenomenon at this point, and it's not. and I don't know what the show has to do to catch on because it's so far doing everything right. This should be much more popular. It should be popular in the same way Fargo got popular or how Breaking Bad eventually got popular. I think this is kind of playing in that same ballpark. It may not be as great as some of the like classics, but it has the potential to have its own classic episodes, which a lot of people feel about Ronnie and Lily, you know. I'm in the minority on that one. Great writing, just terrific writing from Berg and Hader. Great performances. Stephen Root's always phenomenal. He's really great. Henry Winkler gets a lot of more dramatic, emotional scenes to do here. Hank's terrific, and the girl who plays Sally, I think, really gives I think she deserves an Emmy nomination this season. I think she's so good here, and possibly a Golden Globe nomination. And I could see Barry getting nominated for a bunch of awards again, just like it did for the first season. And I'm very excited for season 3, and I would highly recommend Barry season 2 because Barry season 1, I said, it had real pathos, and that's why it stuck with you. This is more of at the end here, I guess, is what this season's about. If I have my theory on it, I can sum it up is that what truth versus what's real, what's true to you, perception, truth in acting, truth in art, and this season's sort of playing with that, even with the absurdity. And I think that's going to be ultimately the thesis or the statement that Hader's going to try to make over the show is because, like I said, actors are naturally lying. They're performing as someone else. And I think that's what he's playing at here is who are you really? And are you just playing this character? But these actors are playing characters, but are we all just putting a performance on in our real life? Are we all just playing pretend? Are we actually being ourselves when we talk to other people? Or do we just present ourselves as who we want those people to see us as in that moment when we're interacting with them because it's convenient to us and it helps us feel good about ourselves? It strokes our ego. And that everyone in this class is so self-obsessed they don't see how odd Barry is and they don't notice that he might be up to something. All of that is so good. But I think overall I probably like the first season a little bit more. But that whole thing about truth and who we really are, I think is handled very well here. And I don't think the acting class stuff weighed this season down at all. And I just think maybe what this suffered from is it didn't have the surprise of season 1. We didn't really know what the show was, and it was like they were discovering what the show was. Where this, I came in with a certain amount of expectation that they met for the most part. So kudos to everyone involved with the show, and I'd say Bill Hader has a bright career ahead of him, not just as an actor, but as a filmmaker. And I'm very excited to see his future work, and I hope that when he ends this show, he goes and makes his Blood Simple or his Sex Lies and Videotape, what have you. I hope he goes out there and does that. And he seems like a really interesting guy. I really like Bill Hader. I always liked Bill Hader, but I really like him now. And it's nice seeing someone you followed this long actually evolve, because I feel like a lot of artists don't evolve as time goes on. They kind of get stagnant, or they stay in their comfort zone, and Hader seems like he's trying to avoid that at all costs, and I admire that greatly. So tell me what you think in the comments section. Thank you for watching.